Hi there everyone, welcome to the April standalone die release. I have an overly floral card to share with you today, but on the blog I'm sharing 4 more cards featuring other products from the release, so be sure to check them out. This is Creative Coloring with Erum, and today I will be sharing with you one of the ways in which I watercolor my die cut images. I have several ways to watercolor die cuts, but I'll focus on this one in particular, which I use when I have to die cut a lot of flowers. So I'll be using the mini flower cluster layering die set and the 9x12 watercolor cardstock. I have cut my 9x12 watercolor cardstock into 3x9 pieces so I can fit these into my mini blossom die cutting machine. This is what I'll be creating, but not replicas of these, as in my layers are going to be switched up in terms of color gradation. This one is dark to light, bottom to top, but now the flowers that I'll adhere together will have random shades of layers. Some are going to be dark, light, so it depends on whatever I get my hands on. I'll apply water with the Altenew flat brush and then add pigment from the ruby red watercolor brush marker. You can also use liquid watercolors that Altenew has for easy and faster coverage. Next, I'll add the purple wine in the areas that are not covered, and also mix it up with a bit of ruby red in places to form a third shade. This is going to be the darkest panel. If you are recreating this, remember not to blend it too well. The splotchier, the better. That will add to the texture. For the second one, I'll use the leftover pigment, and if I need more, I'll add a bit more of both the pigments that I used earlier. If you are scared to add pigment directly onto the panel, squeeze some of it out onto the palette and use it from there, just as you would use your watercolors from the pan. Just make sure to keep it lighter than the first one. This can be light in some places and a little dark in some places. It will add to the variation of the flowers. For the last one, I'll pick up the pigment from the palette and really clean the palette well. I don't think we need more pigment on here, but just to change it up a little bit from the pinky pinks, I'll add a bit of Rouge pigment for variation. The Rouge pigment has a bit of yellow tint to it, and it gives a little bit of a peachy tint. Lastly, but not the least, I'll create my green panel, and again, I'll start by applying water to the panel. Then I'll apply emerald, and then just green for the vibrancy, and then lime. But notice that I keep this towards the top. It's because I need a very light green at the bottom for my topmost layers of the die cut. I just pull out the pigment with water so that I have a very diluted color at the bottom. Here are all the panels. What I'm going to do is I'll cut out the base layer from all the 3 pink layers. So all my flower layers will be cut out of all the shades of pink cardstock. I'm not going to cut out all the base layers from the darkest one. I'll switch it up, as I said earlier, so that all my flowers look a bit different without having to color them differently individually. By the way, it just occurred to me that this color combination is something that you would see us, people in my part of the world, wearing. It's probably one of the most oldest, the most common, or the most popular color combination you'd see us wearing at our mehndi functions, the henna functions that is, or even in normal wear clothing. I'll pop up a couple of photos if I find it at the time. While I was talking about the colors, I'm also adhering the double-sided adhesive sheet behind my panels so that the gluing process is faster, the adhering the die cuts, that is. I've recently received a packet of Altenew double-sided adhesive sheets and I've been using them for all the intricate die cuts. Once my adhesive sheet is adhered behind my watercolor cardstock, I'll place my dies and run it through my die cutting machine. Now I've all the pieces die cut except for the tiny flower centers. I'll do that later on. I'll now start adhering the layers together. Not a difficult job. You can follow the guide on the packaging. I also followed the guide on the packaging. It's very easy to do this. As you can see, my original one is a tad different. I used an orange base layer on this one, but when I have all the flowers on the card, you will not notice the difference between these flowers. So for my background, I will use a bit of just green pigment from the watercolor brush markers on the A2 watercolor cardstock and watercolor it in a way to make it look like an ink smooshed background. You can also do ink smooshing if you want to, but I'm going this way because I want more control over this, as I do not want a fully watercolored panel. Once I'm happy with the background, I'll arrange my florals and see how I want my layout to look like. Once I arranged my florals, I thought the layout looked perfect to incorporate the trellis die in there, and you have seen me incorporate the trellis die with my florals quite a few times now. I love adding the trellis die and it looks wonderful with crafted flower dies especially. So I die cut one right away and like always I snipped some of it off and altered it, and I used the Altenew tape to adhere it to the card front. I had already picked my arrangement with the press and seal. I just have to remove the adhesive backing and add glue to the places where there's no adhesive and place this onto the card front. Then I'll adhere the leaves that fell off. Please know that the press and seal has its limits. The die cuts are made out of layers of 9x12 watercolor cardstock, which itself is so sturdy that after layering it essentially becomes a chipboard. So a few pieces are bound to fall off, especially if you have so many die cuts there. Next, I'll cut off any excess overhanging die cut pieces for a very finished look. And then to add my touch to this card, I'll add white chalk paint splatters to the flowers, which does add a lot of watercolor effect and a nice look to the flowers. And as soon as this dried, I stamped the sentiment from the Strength Blooms stamp. And I thought the sentiment was so perfect for my card, isn't it? I hope you like my card. The layout also works if you invert it upside down. I liked that one better, but because I had already stamped my sentiment, there was no turning back. I have one more card on the block featuring the mini flower cluster layering die set paired with a circular elements die set, a pastel rainbow number featuring the whimsical garden layering die set, and the fancy kisses die, a very clean and simple card featuring the mental decor spring die set. You won't even believe that I created this card. It's so clean and simple. And last but not the least, my watercolor leafy goodness featuring the decorative swirls die set and the 3D banner die set. Link is in the description. We all have worked really hard to bring to you tons of inspiration and ideas on how to use the products in this new release. Hop on over to the blog for info on prices. Thank you for watching.